Can you breed and raise foals on a small acreage? What are the must-have, the trade-off, and the challenges of doing just that? Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Veronique, and I've bred and raised foals for 20 years on a small acreage. So today, I want to share with you what I did to pull that off and show you that it is possible and offer you some ideas on how to go about it. So first of all, let's talk about what small means. Our property, for example, is 14 acres, of which once you remove the footprint of the house, the garage, the barn, driveway, and the marshy area, tucked in the corner, you're basically left with about 9 acres that are usable. If you think, hey, that's not so small, let's address the fact that numbers can be deceiving at first. You see, I live in an area where the ground is pretty poor. We get very little rain, and it can snow pretty much any time in the year. So we have about 4.5 months of growing season, and only about 2 of those can grow grass. Therefore, the carrying capacity of my land is small. It's between 0.25 on a bad year and 0.4 on the good years, the years we have good rain. And we've mostly had dry years lately. I've basically had to manage my land like a much smaller farm. I technically have room for 2 horses. I will show you at the end of the video how my place is set up and how I run it. When you look at your plot of land, first thing you need to know is how productive it is, because it will have an impact on how much you need to manage the first aspect of keeping any horses, and that is land management. How will you manage your footprint? Mares and foals need room to move, and if you have more than one pair, they need room to get away from each other without running into fences. So you need to put aside the largest part of your area as a pasture. If you have more than one mare expecting a foal that year, you really should also have a smaller pasture where the mare can be alone with their foal in peace for the first 2 weeks. After it's born, you need to give them time to bond, and the foal needs to learn how to navigate its environment without having too much chance of an accident. I call that the baby pasture. It's a small pasture where the mare and foal can run, but they can't pick up too much steam, and it has a good shelter, no gopher holes, and no poisonous plant, because baby horses are not quite smart enough to avoid those for themselves at first. And of course, very important, safe fences. You don't want a place where the baby can slip under the fence by accident, because whenever you have mama on one side and baby on the other, something will have to give. Either your fence will go down or your vet bill will go up. The other thing you will need is a sacrifice paddock. That's an area that you will sacrifice in order to save the rest of your pastures. Yes, it eats away from your area available for grazing, but you need a place where you can confine your horses when the weather makes the pasture fragile and more susceptible to damage. It needs to be big enough to comfortably contain your little herd, but not much bigger. This is the area where you will confine the horses when the pasture are soggy, for example, so they don't get all ripped up, or when the spring grass comes up and you don't want your horse foundering on it. Really, anytime you want to limit the grazing or monitor your horses for whatever reason, this is where you will confine them. This is also where you will feed them and have water available. It's also where you will handle the horses and teach the foals their first lesson. Because it will be the area with the most traffic and activity, this is where you will need to invest in good quality ground drainage and solid fences. Because pasture are the lifeblood of your farm, you need to consider supporting them through rotation, fertilizing, and harrowing. You can do pasture rotation with the help of temporary electric fences. The fertilizing can be done anytime ahead of rain, and pasture should be mowed and harrowed so that you can prevent too many weeds from taking over, spreading their seed. The harrowing will rip up the manure and allow it to disintegrate a lot quicker. Some patches in the pasture will need to be constantly maintained because the horses will overgraze them or trample them. I give every area a little bit of a break by fencing it off with high visibility electrical tape. Mares know about the electrical fence, and the foals learn as early as possible to stay away from them, and that works well for everyone. The smaller your pastures are, the more you will need to manage them carefully. The other big challenge of small acreages is the manure management. On a big farm, manure can be picked up and hauled away or spread over pastures that will be grazed later on in the year. But if you only have a few acres, you won't be able to do that. Even with a cute little manure spreader, you just won't have the room to spread the manure on. You need to find a way to store the manure away from water, obviously, and find a surface that will haul it away from you. We spread it on my neighbor's pasture or mine. We alternate between the two, and I have to do that every second year. That's with having between 4 and 5 horses on the property. Finally, something you need to consider ahead of time if you're going to have a foal or a few is what to do at weaning. No matter at what age you choose to do it or what method you use, the foal and the mares will need to be kept apart for a few months to allow for the mare to completely dry out. Otherwise, it's very likely that putting the foal back with its mother will simply trigger some milk production. If the mare is back in foal, then it makes even more sense, and it's more imperative that she dries up at least a month or 2 prior just to get ready for her next foal. So, you need a weaning area, something that has very solid fence and safe fence that will prevent the foal from reaching through, because sometimes the mares are very accommodating and generous and they'll park themselves right beside the fence and allow the foal to nurse right through the fence. See, on big farms, the group of foals can be moved to another pasture far away and left alone, or sometimes it's the mares that are moved away. But in any case, whatever it is, you don't have that luxury on a small acreage. They will hear and see each other, so the fence between them need to be strong. What are the trade-offs you have to be ready to accept with a smaller property? You will need more and better fences, good gates, and a smart layout. Every square feet will count. You will need to invest more time and energy keeping things clean and managing your pasture so they can take the extra grazing pressure. A lot will depend, of course, on the climate, mind you, and the carrying capacity of your land. Some area can house 2 to 3 horses per acre, sometime with irrigation, a few more. While other places, like mine, can tolerate 1 horse for every few acres, or they turn into dust bowls. You will handle and move your horses more. It's a good thing when it comes to handling foals. The big farms will have them in a large pasture where they might see a human a few times a week. On a small acreage, the foals will see you a few times a day and be handled a lot sooner. The biggest challenge you will need to juggle will be the manure, the compaction from traffic, and the grazing management of your pasture. I already talked about the manure. The heavy traffic area will need mud control and reinforcement. So let's take a look at how my farm is laid out and ran. Basically, the property is split in 2. Each side have a source of water, a sacrifice paddock area, and shelters. There's also a baby paddock on both sides, and the strongest fence are these here. Like I said, I accumulate the manure behind the barn where it can be picked up for spreading every 2 years or so. Because I know I will need to feed hay all year round because my pasture need to be carefully managed, I have plenty of hay storage in the barn. I can put up to 600 square bales. My mares foaled for years in pens outside, and a few years ago we invested in a large foaling stall. We built it as an extension to the existing barn. I harrow the fields in the spring. I rotate the pasture every few weeks, but no matter what I do, the grass stops growing in early August, so I have to be careful. If I can leave one pasture closed for the whole summer and only open it in September, that lets the horse graze well into winter. Mares and foals come in every evening for their buckets of supplement mineral and proteins. If the pasture need a break, that's when I would close the gate behind them and they stay in the sacrifice paddock for the night. I give them some hay and I turn them back out in the morning. On years where we get lots of rain and the grass grows well, then I might lug them up at night, but maybe not. That's a choice I have. Sometimes I let them out 24/7. When I do fertilize the field, they need to stay off of it for a few days at least. Same if I need to treat a patch of stubborn weed with some herbicide, or simply I need to wait for the ground to dry after a heavy rain. We do get them occasionally. So extra gate and fencing makes all this possible. 20 years, 2 to 4 foals a year, and lots of work every summer keeping all this going has allowed me to breed and raise horses here for, like I said, over 20 years now. I hope you like this and that you learned something. And if you like the practical and scientific aspect of raising horses, then you found the right channel because that's pretty much all I talk about. Hopefully you will like this video and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.